everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. We're always looking for the best shortcuts to knowledge here. And today we're tackling cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity, yeah.
But not just the
how-tos, the nitty-gritty.
Exactly. We're diving deep into the Australian Cybersecurity Center's Essential 8.
The Essential 8.
8 strategies prioritized for a reason.
Absolutely.
And because we like to get specific, consider this your cheat sheet.
That's right.
Complete with how to tell if these strategies are really working.
Yeah, are they really working? How do you measure that? We'll tell you.
Ready to unlock the secrets of the Essential 8?
Let's do it.
All right. So, think of cyber threats like a ladder.
Okay.
At the bottom rung.
Bottom rung, yeah.
You have opportunistic attackers, those who capitalize on easy vulnerabilities.
Right, they're just looking for the low-hanging fruit.
Right, and then the higher you climb, the more sophisticated the threats become.
That's right.
So, like, forgetting to update your phone's operating system versus a full-on targeted hack.
Exactly. Precisely. The Essential 8 maturity model maps out this ladder with 4 levels. 0 to 3.
Okay.
Level 1 is your solid foundation, protecting you from those everyday threats.
Okay, so no, starting at the top, even if you think you're tech savvy.
No, not at all. Level 1 is crucial for everyone.
Okay.
It's about closing those obvious gaps that attackers love to exploit.
Right.
Let's say you're a small business owner.
Mm-hmm.
You might think, well, why would hackers target me?
Right.
But the truth is, opportunistic attackers use automated tools to scan for easy targets.
Oh, okay.
Like those with unpatched software.
Okay, so that makes me think of those phishing emails
Yes.
that try to trick you into clicking on a bad link.
Yes. Anyone could fall for that, right?
Right, exactly.
Exactly, and that's why patching your applications, especially those internet-facing ones, is non-negotiable.
Oh, okay.
Imagine leaving your front door unlocked.
Right.
That's essentially what you're doing if you don't patch vulnerabilities quickly.
So how quickly are we talking? Should I be hitting that update button every time it pops up?
So the Australian Signals Directorate, or ASD, recommends patching critical vulnerabilities on internet-facing systems within 48 hours.
Oh, okay.
Think web servers, for example.
Mm-hmm.
For other applications, like your office software,
Yeah.
you have a bit more breathing room. 2 weeks, to be exact.
2 weeks. Okay, got it. So I'm guessing just saying, yep, we patch regularly
Right.
isn't going to cut it when it comes to proving you're following the Essential 8.
You're absolutely right. The ASD emphasizes evidence quality.
Okay.
They use a 4-tier system.
Okay.
Excellent, good, fair, and poor.
Okay.
The gold standard, excellent evidence, means actually trying to exploit the vulnerability.
Oh, wow.
For example, attempting to run a test application to see if your application control blocks it.
So putting your security to the test?
Putting it to the test.
It's like setting off a fake fire alarm to make sure everybody knows what to do.
Exactly.
Right.
Good evidence involves looking at system configurations.
Okay.
Fair relies on things like screenshots.
Right.
And poor is basically just documentation or someone saying, yeah, we do that.
Which, I mean, we've established is about as useful as a chocolate teapot.
Exactly.
Well,
It's not going to hold any water.
Right. Exactly.
Now, let's talk about another essential control in maturity level 1.
Mm-hmm.
Multi-factor authentication,
Okay.
or MFA.
MFA, everyone's favorite. Extra layer of security, right. I'm already using it for most of my accounts, but what does level 1 specifically require?
At this level, it's about adding something you have to something you know.
Okay.
Think hardware tokens, those little gadgets that generate codes, authenticator apps,
Right.
or security keys.
Okay.
We're talking about making it significantly harder for an attacker to get in, even if they have your password.
So no more relying solely on that text message code.
While SMS codes can be a factor,
Right.
they're not as secure as other methods.
Okay.
Think about SIM swapping attack, where someone convinces your mobile provider to transfer your number to their SIM card.
Right.
Suddenly, that text message is going straight to the attacker.
Yikes. See, that's why I ask.
Yeah.
What about biometrics?
Sure.
Aren't fingerprint scans and facial recognition considered pretty secure these days?
They can be helpful,
Okay.
but at level 1, we're focusing on foundational controls.
Right.
And biometrics have their limitations.
Okay.
Unlike a password that you can change.
Right.
If your fingerprint gets compromised, it's compromised for life.
That's a really good point.
Yeah,
So at level 1, it's all about that physical token or authentication app.
exactly. And speaking of things we need to keep a close eye on, let's talk about administrative privileges.
Administrative privileges, huh?
Yeah.
Those sound pretty serious.
Yeah.
What's the big deal with controlling those?
Think of admin privileges as the keys to the kingdom, right?
Okay.
If an attacker gets a hold of them,
Right.
they can wreak havoc. Imagine someone getting access to all your data, changing system settings, or even deleting crucial files.
Right.
That's why Maturity Level 1 stresses the importance of keeping these privileges on a very tight leash.
Okay, I'm starting to see why that's a bad thing.
Yes.
How do we prevent that kind of disaster?
One key strategy is the principle of least privilege.
Okay.
This means granting users only the minimum level of access they need to do their jobs.
Right.
No more, and no more granting everyone admin rights just to make things easier, right?
Right. Because convenience shouldn't come at the cost of security.
Exactly.
So how do we actually put this into practice?
One common approach is creating separate user accounts for everyday tasks
Okay.
and administrative tasks.
Okay.
Think of it like having a regular user account for checking your email and browsing the web,
Mm-hmm.
and a completely separate account with limited access time for making system changes or installing software.
Makes sense. So no more like checking social media from the same account that has access to, sensitive data.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And to take things a step further,
Okay.
organizations often use what's called a jump server.
Okay.
It acts as a secure gateway, specifically designed for administrative tasks.
So it's like a security checkpoint
Exactly.
that admins have to go through each time they need to make changes.
Exactly. This adds an extra layer of authentication,
Right.
making it much harder for attackers to slip through the cracks.
Okay.
And while we're on the topic of administrative access,
Yeah.
let's not forget about those shared accounts or default passwords.
Oh, yeah.
Big no-no.
Those sound like recipes for disaster. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how should organizations manage all those accounts securely?
Each privileged account should have a unique and strong password.
Right.
We're talking long, complex, unpredictable, something even a password guessing program would struggle with.
Okay, so no more password 123 or writing it on a sticky note under the keyboard.
Exactly.
Got it.
No,
But managing all those complex passwords sounds like a headache.
absolutely. That's where password managers come in.
Okay.
They store all your complex passwords securely,
Right.
so you only need to remember one master password.
Right.
It's like having a digital vault for your keys.
Password manager's a cybersecurity essential.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on to the next strategy in maturity level 1. Application control.
Okay.
What's
Yeah.
the deal with this one?
Application control is like having a strict bouncer at the door of your computer system.
Okay.
Only authorized software is allowed in,
Right.
keeping malicious programs at bay.
Okay.
It's a proactive way to prevent harm before it happens.
Sounds like a good strategy, especially when you consider how sneaky malware can be these days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at this level, it's not just about the applications themselves,
Okay.
but also where they can run from.
Right.
For example, you might have a rule that only allows software from trusted locations like your organization's network to run.
Okay.
No more downloading suspicious files and hoping for the best.
Right. No more risky clicks.
It's-
So how do you actually implement application control? Is it complicated?
There are many options available,
Okay.
from built-in tools like Windows Defender Application Control to more robust third-party solutions.
Okay.
The key is finding one that fits your organization's specific needs
Right.
and technical expertise.
So it's about finding the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
Now, I've heard some horror stories about malicious Microsoft Office macros.
Yes.
How does application control deal with those?
Macros can be incredibly useful,
Right.
but they can also be hijacked by attackers to spread malware.
Right.
Maturity Level 1 is very strict about restricting their use.
Okay.
Unless there's a genuine business need,
Right.
macros should be disabled by default.
No more macro mayhem. But for those who do require macros for specific tasks, what precautions can they take?
Education is key.
Okay.
Train your employees to recognize and avoid suspicious macros.
Right.
Additionally, ensure your antivirus software is up to date and configured to scan for malicious macros. And remember, if a macro asks you to enable content, think twice.
Okay.
That could be a red flag.
Okay, so stay vigilant and don't trust everything you see.
Exactly.
Sound advice. Now, besides keeping the bad stuff out, I imagine there's also a lot of monitoring involved in cybersecurity.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Logging and analyzing events is crucial.
Okay.
It's like having security cameras for your computer system,
Okay.
recording who accessed what, when, and from where.
So it's not enough to just have the security measures in place.
Right.
You need to be actively watching for any signs of trouble.
Precisely. Level 1 stresses the importance of collecting logs for critical events.
Okay.
Login attempts, file changes, administrative actions, and then analyzing them for anything suspicious.
Right.
It's all about detecting and responding to threats as quickly as possible.
So it's like having a security guard who's not only guarding the door,
Right.
but also keeping a watchful eye on the security footage.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Now let's move on to another essential piece of the security puzzle, backups.
Backup's the superhero of disaster recovery.
Yes.
But how do they fit into the Essential 8 framework?
Backups are your safety net,
Okay.
especially when facing threats like ransomware,
Right.
which can lock you out of your own data.
Right.
At maturity level 1, you need to make sure you're regularly backing up all your critical data, applications, and system configurations.
So it's not enough to just back everything up.
Right.
You need to be able to restore it quickly and effectively if something goes wrong.
You got it.
What else should our listeners know about backups at this level?
Security is key.
Okay.
Those backups are useless if an attacker can also encrypt or delete them.
Right.
Level 1 emphasizes storing your backups securely,
Okay.
ideally offline or in a separate location,
Right.
and making sure they're protected by strong access controls.
It's like having a spare key,
Yes,
but instead of hiding it under the doormat, you're keeping it locked in a safe.
exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with maturity level 1. Patching, MFA, administrative privileges,
Right.
application control, logging, and backups.
Right.
That's a pretty solid foundation.
Absolutely it is.
But for organizations dealing with more sensitive information or facing more persistent threats,
Yeah.
moving up that maturity ladder becomes essential.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's level up. What does maturity level 2 look like?
Level 2 is all about beefing up those foundational controls
Okay.
to counter more sophisticated attackers.
Okay.
We're talking about the folks who are actively trying to exploit known vulnerabilities
Right.
and bypass basic security measures.
So those who are determined to get in no matter what.
That's right.
Okay. What kind of defenses do you need at this level?
Remember how we talked about application control?
Yes.
At level 2, you're expanding that control to cover internet leasing servers.
All right.
These servers are on the front line constantly bombarded by attacks.
Right.
So they need that extra layer of protection.
That makes sense. Are there any other key differences between level 1 and level 2?
Definitely. We need to talk about phishing-resistant MFA.
Okay, phishing-resistant MFA. Tell me more.
At level 2,
Mhm.
it's not enough to just have any MFA in place.
Okay.
You need to make sure it can withstand phishing attacks,
Okay.
where attackers try to trick you into handing over your authentication codes.
So that text message code we talked about earlier might not cut it at this level?
Exactly.
Okay.
At level 2, you'd be looking at more secure options like hardware tokens,
Okay.
smart cards, or even those newfangled passkeys.
Passkeys, those are the ones that use cryptography instead of passwords, right?
You got it. They're much harder for attackers to intercept or steal, even with sophisticated phishing techniques.
Wow.
Now, let's circle back to those administrative privileges.
Mm-hmm.
At level 2, the restrictions get even tighter.
Okay, so even more lockdown on those powerful admin accounts.
Exactly.
What changes?
Think regular revalidation.
Okay.
If an account hasn't been used in a while, say 45 days,
Right.
it's likely stale and should be disabled.
So it's a use it or lose it policy for admin accounts.
Pretty much.
I like it. It prevents those forgotten accounts from becoming easy targets for attackers.
Exactly.
What about those jump servers we talked about earlier?
Level 2 mandates that all administrative activities go through them, no exceptions.
Okay.
And we're getting serious about logging too.
Okay, so more watchful eyes on those security cameras.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
We're centrally collecting and analyzing logs for everything. Successful and failed MFA attempts, privileged access, application control events, you name it.
So no event goes unnoticed.
Pretty much.
Now, you mentioned that level 2 is about beefing up those foundational controls.
Yes.
What does that look like beyond the specifics we've discussed?
It's about going beyond just patching
Okay.
and really hardening your applications and operating system.
Okay.
We're talking disabling unnecessary features, implementing secure configurations, and following the latest hardening guidance from trusted sources like the Australian Cybersecurity Center.
So it's like reinforcing your defenses at every possible point.
Exactly. And those reinforcements make a world of difference when you're facing more determined attackers.
Okay, so level 2 sounds pretty intense.
It can be.
But I can see how those extra layers of security would be crucial for certain organizations.
Absolutely.
Now, for those who handle extremely sensitive data or operate in high-risk environments, tell me about maturity level 3.
Okay.
The peak of the essential 8.
Right. Level 3 is about anticipating the moves of the most skilled and relentless attackers.
Okay.
We're talking about the ones who are constantly developing new techniques
Right.
and exploiting zero-day vulnerabilities.
The cybersecurity elite. They sound almost mythical. How do you even begin to defend against that level of sophistication?
It's about staying ahead of the game. Patching those critical vulnerabilities within 48 hours becomes even more crucial at level 3.
Right.
And not just for servers.
Okay.
We're talking every single system,
Wow.
including workstations.
So no system gets a free pass at this level. Everything needs to be up to date and locked down tight.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And those legacy applications that are no longer supported,
Yeah.
they need to go.
Oh.
Clinging to outdated software is a recipe for disaster at this level.
Out with the old, in with the new, and secure.
Exact.
What other defenses are crucial for achieving level 3?
Backups get even more serious at this level.
Okay.
We're talking about limiting access to only a select few highly trusted individuals,
Right.
like your backup administrators.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about access, it's about control.
Okay.
These administrators shouldn't even be able to modify or delete backups during the retention period.
Oh, wow. That's a, next level backup protection.
It is.
Yeah.
It's all about minimizing the impact of even the most sophisticated ransomware attacks.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about those macro controls we discussed earlier? Do they evolve at level 3?
Absolutely.
Okay.
While disabling macros entirely is ideal,
Right.
it's not always feasible.
Right.
So level 3 pushes for those stronger controls we talked about.
Okay.
Like running macros in a sandboxed environment.
Right.
Or restricting them to specific trusted locations.
So it's about limiting the potential damage, even if a macro does manage to slip through the cracks.
Exactly. And finally,
Okay.
to really clamp down on administrative access, level 3 encourages organizations to implement just-in-time administration.
Okay, we've touched on that term briefly, but remind me what it means in practice.
It means that those privileged accounts are only given the access they need at the exact moment they need it.
Okay.
And for a limited time.
Okay.
It's like giving someone a temporary access badge that expires after they've completed their task.
No more leaving those keys to the kingdom lying around.
Exactly.
So maturity level 3 is truly the gold standard of cybersecurity.
It is.
It's clear that reaching this level requires a significant commitment and ongoing investment.
It does. But for organizations that handle highly sensitive data,
Right.
or face persistent advanced threats,
Right.
it's the level of protection they need to strive for.
Absolutely. Well, that was an incredible deep dive into the Essential 8.
It was.
You've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
From the basics of patching and MFA
Yeah.
to the complexities of hardening systems and implementing those advanced access controls.
Right.
It's clear that cybersecurity is not a one-time fix,
It's not.
but rather an ongoing journey.
It is.
The threat landscape is constantly evolving, so it's essential to stay informed, stay vigilant, and continuously adapt your security posture to stay ahead of the curve.
Couldn't agree more.
So to our listeners, remember, cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility.
Absolutely.
Start by implementing those foundational controls we discussed, stay informed about the latest threats, and don't hesitate to seek expert advice if you need it.
That's right.
And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive into cybersecurity. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.
See you next time.